So what's the key to mastering jiu-jitsu? Or forget jiu-jitsu, what's the key to mastering anything? Well, you know the answer to that question. I know the answer. It's pretty obvious. The answer is consistency. You have to practice. The problem with something like jiu-jitsu, because it's an intense physical activity, especially for those of us that are over the age of 40, over the age of 50, we have finite energy, recovery can be a problem. Being able to train consistently enough to make reasonably fast progress can be a real problem. It can be difficult. So let's see if we can unlock the secret to getting good at jiu-jitsu relatively quickly. So what's the key to getting good at jiu-jitsu relatively efficiently? And before we begin, check it out. I've got swag now. I've designed about a dozen items. These are all my original designs. I've got a couple t-shirts and a hoodie. I've got these really killer embroidered denim jackets. I've got a wine tumbler and a water bottle and a coffee cup and a baseball cap. I even have, for Father's Day coming up, a grill apron that says the art of grill on it, kind of a fun play on the art of skill concept. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, just head over to rickellis.com and click the shop link and we will hook you up. And as always, if you like content like this, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Consistency is the key to mastery. We all know this. Consistency is the key to mastery. You want to be a good pianist, you have to practice consistently. You want to be a great pianist, you have to practice not only consistently, but you have to put in a fair volume of practice, meaning the duration of your practice sessions needs to be long enough. This is true of jiu-jitsu as well. We have to train frequently enough to get good reasonably fast. You can progress training 1 day a week, and that's fine. A lot of people do that. If this is just a hobby, if it's just something you like to do, okay, that's great. If you're someone that's a little more competitive with yourself, I tend to be competitive, I like to try to master things relatively quickly, then you might want to train 2, 3, 4 times a week, 5 times a week if you can. The problem is because jiu-jitsu is an intense physical activity and we have finite energy stores, each one of us, that can be a problem. Frequency can be a problem because what happens is your body starts breaking down. Recovery can be a problem. You end up with some lingering injuries that don't want to go away because you're just not resting enough. And so this can be a challenge. So how do we deal with that? Well, the way we deal with that is by lowering the intensity. Consistency is far, far more important than intensity. The old school mentality of leave it all on the mat, you have to just hammer hard, spar every single round. Well, those things are great if you're 20. If you're a high school wrestler, if you're a collegiate football player, that's fine. You can leave it all on the practice field. But older adults, you can't hammer like that. You're going to break yourself down. And I've seen it many times. People join a jiu-jitsu school, you're enthusiastic, you're excited, you want to start mastering this, you start just hammering hard, you're competitive, you want to be competitive with those training partners that you're coming up with, and then you start getting injured, you start having some lingering problems, recovery's a problem. I'd like to suggest to you that you need to dial the intensity way down. And that can be hard. If you're competitive, that can be hard, admittedly. But it's the only path forward that's going to give you enough frequency of training. I came up with this concept. I did a video on this a couple years ago. It's one of my early videos on this channel. It's something I call the triangle of energy. The triangle of energy is 3 variables that are present anytime you train. Frequency, which is how often you train. Intensity, which is how hard you hammer. Volume, which is the duration of that training session. Frequency, intensity, volume. And the case that I made in that other video was that you can really only have 2 of the 3. Sometimes not even 2 of the 3, right? if you want frequency, you can't have intensity and volume, right? So you have to make a decision. What's more important to you? Is it training often so you can continuously get that technical infusion, right? And if that's your goal, that's my goal, then you have to keep the intensity under control, and you have to keep the volume under control to some extent. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, it means I'm not sparring every round. For one, that's how you keep the volume low. I'll spar 1, 2, 3 rounds, then I'll sit one out, then I'll spar another one, then I'll sit one out, maybe I'll sit out a couple, and then I'll jump in for another. And I'm also keeping the intensity under control when I spar. I'm always monitoring my breath. I'm always monitoring my heart rate. And my heart rate is almost never faster than the training partners I'm going against. Almost never. And I do that on purpose. With skill, you develop the ability to dial down the intensity and still have a level of effectiveness, admittedly. But if you're always hammering harder or as hard as the people you're training against, then it's just too much. It's again, I've stated the case. You're going to break yourself down. So you need to keep your ego in check and realize that ultimately you're only in competition with yourself. I'm a very competitive person, but I focus that competitiveness just against myself, against the old me. I'm trying to be better than the old me. In jiu-jitsu, I want to be better as measured by my ability to be effective against skill. And so that's my goal. To achieve that goal, frequency is going to pay far more dividends than anything else. So I would encourage you to really pay attention when you go train, especially during sparring. Pay attention to your output. Pay attention to, if there's a moment during your training when the volume is starting to get too high, it's okay to sit out a round. You don't have to train every single round. And if your coach is yelling at you to get in there and not take a round off, you need to talk to them and say, listen, I'm 46, I'm 50, I'm even 38. I'm 38. Listen, I can't train every single round. I want to be here every night. I want to be here every other night. I can't train every single round. That's the key. And, can you build more work capacity so that you can train with more intensity and more volume and frequency? Of course, those things can be developed too. So I would encourage you to tinker with those 3 elements, frequency, intensity, and volume. Tinker with that a little bit. Start with your end goal in mind. What's the end goal? Well, if the end goal is frequency, then you're going to have to finesse the other elements to be able to get through your training. And it's okay. Listen, I'm pretty good. My first round, second round, third round, I feel like I can hold my own against just about anybody. By the time I get to my 4th, 5th round, I'm slowing way down. And, that's enough of a slowdown that even though I'm a black belt, it means that against these young, big purple belts, some of the young, strong brown belts, they might have me on the run. And that's okay. I'll practice my defense. I'm real hard to tap. It's okay. It's okay. You let go of the ego and you train for the joy of it. You train because, again, you are in competition with yourself. I'm not in competition with those guys. And I need to keep my output at a level that lets me leave the dojo with fuel left in the tank. That's, I think, the most important thing. Leave the dojo with fuel left in the tank. You want to leave feeling like you could have done more. You want to leave feeling like, maybe I should have done that extra round. Maybe I should have done those extra 2 rounds. That's how you want to feel, because then you'll go home tomorrow, and then tomorrow your mind will be thinking, I want to get back on the mat. I want to train again. I feel pretty good. I don't feel all beat up. I want to train again. And that's the psychological part of this, where you're building that psychological positivity that lets you keep training instead of training just being a grind because you're hammering super hard every night. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Consistency is much more important than intensity. Yeah, there you go. We'll talk next time.